Great. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. Today we are talking about letting the robots classify, automating IG with confidence. Now, you may notice that Sandy is not with us today. She is off, but joining me today is Rich Lowers, who is Information Governance Program Manager here at Valora. So welcome, Rich. We are happy to have you. And thank you for everyone who's joining us today. Some housekeeping before we get started. You are here in our 2026 webinar series. So please, if you'd like to register for any of our future webinars, you can head up the website at valoratech.com under resources, maybe. All of our future webinars will be there. And if you've missed any, all of our on-demand webinars will be there as well in case you'd like to catch up. So a little bit about Valora, if you are new here, we do offer an auto-classification platform for information governance and lifecycle management. So it uses auto-classification technology and machine learning algorithms to help automate the discovery and the defensible disposition of content, regardless of where it lives across the enterprise. And usually used by information governance teams, records managers, records teams, compliance teams, because it helps them bring kind of those multiple enterprise repositories into a single view and into that single pane of glass, which is awfully helpful. So that's a little bit about us, a little bit about you. When you register for the webinar, we always like to ask you kind of who you are, where you're coming from, and what your challenges in information governance are. So today around the table, we've got lots of records and IM folks, compliance and data privacy and security. So welcome. And we always ask, what are kind of your main challenges and what are you thinking about for this year? And a lot this time about file cleanup and rot, a lot of automating some manual processes, managing automatically those retention policies, and our favorite, OMG, everything. So we're going to touch on a little bit of everything today when we talk about how to automate information governance with auto-classification. And a little bit of housekeeping. So there's Q&A here. We can see it. I can see it. Rich can see it. So feel free to put something in the chat or the Q&A. Oh, I can see the chat now too. Are we in the chat?
Excellent. Yes,
we do chat? Let's do chat.
I do chat.
Okay, let's do chat. In the chat, we'll both be monitoring that. So please feel free to ask questions or provide commentary as we go. We will have a Q&A session at the end, but again, we'll answer them as we go. If you've attended a Valora webinar before, we are pretty free flowing here. So we like to make it as conversational and as interactive as we can. So please don't hesitate to say, wait a second, and stop us there. The recording of this will be sent out after the fact, as well as a copy of the slides so that you will have them. And of course, we welcome your feedback at any time about either the topics we're talking about or things you might like to see. So we welcome that. All right, so we've got 60 minutes. 55 minutes now, and I think we'll be able to fit everything in. Usually we're like talking really quickly at the end, but I think we've left ourselves enough time today. So what we are talking about, and here's our little robot. So it's a bit tongue-in-cheek letting the robots classify because we're talking about auto-classification and AI, but what we're talking about today, what we want to bring you through is data sprawl and the risk of that data sprawl. Why now for auto-classification and what we're seeing in industry when kind of that turn of decisioning and the trust in AI and auto-classification. We're going to go through some auto-classification use cases and how other organizations are using that technology in their business and for what use cases. And then today we're also going to go through a case study and a real-world example of a client and how they used auto-classification technology within their kind of own use case and in their own environment. And then kind of 5 things how to get started with auto-classification. So we got a lot of stuff to get into today. So we'll hop in. And Rich, you just hop in whenever you want. I can't.
Are you displaying your slide deck now?
Yeah. Can you not see it? I can see stop sharing.
Okay, good. All right. Then it must be my windows covering each other.
Can somebody let me know if you cannot see the slides in the little chat? Teams, our friend. Okay, I can't see anything, so I'm gonna continue. But somebody let me know if you can't see them. So let's talk about kind of that evolution of records management. So I would say, just from what I've seen anyhow, and somebody please comment if you've seen a little bit more, but I would say over the last 5 years or so, there's been this kind of shift of understanding, I'll say, with the importance of the information governance role in an organization. Because it used to be that information governance was kind of synonymous with like strict traditional records management. So find the record, keep the record, preserve the record, archive the record until said time where you destroy the record. But we're seeing, and the reality is this kind of evolution to this enterprise-wide information governance, because the reality is that every piece of corporate data that we produce needs to be managed, not just the corporate records. So of course, still managing, records and retention and disposition and destruction in that environment, while also accounting for things like e-discovery and legal holds and litigations and data privacy and data security migrations, and then certainly AI as well. AI readiness by having that good, clean data hygiene so that you are confident you are feeding your AI engines and large language models appropriate and correct information. So it's really interesting to see the evolution, and I'll say the acceptance of that kind of traditional RM, but now information governance role. And the challenge now is for IG teams really to be able to manage these multiple use cases and workflows associated with them, like effectively and defensibly. And that challenge really comes from and stems from just the sheer amount of data that we have literally everywhere. So in unstructured, structured system, and in this unmanaged kind of content universe, the manual processes that we've kind of relied on, I'll say, over the last century just aren't serving us anymore. And everyone around the table is kind of asking the same thing: is like, what do we even have? Where is it? Who has access to it? Is there risk? Is it open to people that maybe shouldn't be seeing it? What policies do I apply? How long is this garbage? Like how long do I keep it? Everyone's kind of asking those same questions. And the thing is that the risk is real in kind of having this unknown content, not knowing where it is, how to manage it, who has access, what's private, what's not, what's personal, what's not. It really comes with, depending on what study you read, about 50% of the content that we're currently holding is rot. That's at least what we're seeing in industry. Sometimes it is as high as 60, 70, 75%. So a lot of this is just crap that we could get rid of. Aside from that, there's actual real fines and real financial impact with regulatory fines, litigation exposure, of course, that operational inefficiency of like, who's got the last version of that thing that we worked on 2 weeks ago? Well, that spending time kind of going through all these things and finding the right version, whether it is the right one or not, is awfully time consuming. And then, of course, AI model training. We're going to beat that to death because it is so important to have clean data when starting a project like that. So I'll tell you, so I had a chat with somebody who was new into their role as records manager, and it was a new function in the organization. And so the idea of retention and having a schedule and policies around things was rather new. And she kind of got in, first 2 weeks, getting her feet wet, and somebody turned around and said, cool, how many people do you need? She was like, a billion? Like, so why can we not rely on humans to do this? And there's a few big reasons. Obviously, the first one is human error, the kind of the inconsistencies of calling a tomato, or I consider it this and you consider it that. The biggest one is relying on employees to do it. Dude, it is not my job to tell you and classify this as I'm creating it, or as I'm saving it, or as I'm archiving it. And quite often that is the hardest thing, or the thing that people come up against the most, is the dude's not my job. Of course, scalability issues. When we're talking about this many systems and this much content, it is impossible for humans to keep up with the amount of data, not only that we've got backlog that is like literally sitting here today in our stores, but also what we're creating every single day. And by relying on humans to do this, the compliance risk, because we don't know the decision making, why things were categorized like this, who made this, usually who made the decision, but why they were like this. Well, the buddy's not here anymore and he made this decision 7 years ago. There's not a good way to track and to audit those decisions when humans make them. So there's risk in that. And then, of course, yes, time consuming by all means and costly. And somebody asked me, well, how much do you think that costs? Well, Jen did Gen math and she figured out how costly is asking humans to do this. And if we live in a world where one human who knew something about what I was looking at would take 30 seconds to classify one document. So maybe for 1 million document, it would take one person could classify like roughly 260,000 documents a year. And in an average business, you've got 1,000 people creating new content every day. So let's say in a 1,000 person organization, we're creating about 1.32 million docs a year. You've been in business for 20 years. So you've got a backlog of over 400 million documents. So it would take roughly 1,600 employee years to get through the backlog. Now you're saying, well, I'm not going to ask one person to do this. Nobody has 1,600 years to classify my data. So I'm going to hire a team to get it done in 5 years. Awesome. You will need 329 people to be able to do that. And if you were going to hire them in the US who knew something about a little bit about your data, over 5 years, they could do it for $100 million. And if you were like, I'm going to go overseas because it's much cheaper there. If you had a team of people who knew your data and knew what they were doing, it would only take you $8 million over 5 years. But that's just the stuff that's sitting here today. That's not the stuff that you're going to be accumulating over the next 5 years. So that's just to get through the backlog. So if anybody asks you the math on that, you're certainly welcome to share that math. And if I've made a math mistake, which I am bound to do, please let me know and correct me. But all that to say, it is doable with humans, but not only is it costly, but the risk associated is quite high.
And Jennifer, one of the points on that is that assumes you know what the documents are. If you are in a litigation event and you have to have third-party people look at these documents because of needing lawyers or whatever, the time goes up exponentially and the costs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in this day and age, and with that data accumulation, really technology is the only way. It absolutely reduces human error. So it takes that decision making out of a human who may or may not know. Eliminates that possibility of oversight. It can scale as fast as you need to scale it to the amount of data that you have. It absolutely reduces risks so that you are confident in the decisions that it's making on your data, and everything is audited and tracked. So every decision that an auto classification tool makes, it will tell you why, and it will tell you the confidence score in that decision and the metrics that it took to make that decision. So every decision is traced and is auditable. And of course, by
repeatable.
And repeatable. Absolutely.
Consistent application of your business rules across a data set that you may be familiar with today and the new stuff coming down the pipe or the stuff coming from an acquisition. That the consistency is extremely valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in doing so, not only kind of reducing that risk, but then absolutely reducing, as we saw, the literal actual costs and time to be able to properly classify and properly manage that data. So a thing we were talking about was, why now? And, before we talk about how auto classification works, we can talk about the why now. And I was reading, I don't know if it was an actual like news story or if it was a meme, but I was reading something that, our appetite as a society right now, our appetite for AI and automation is the highest it's been. However, when I'll say Gen AI and OpenAI kind of first came out, the demographic most resistant to it was I say ours, assuming that almost everybody on the call is Gen X, because I assume everyone in the world is Gen X. But our generation was most reluctant because of our early trauma with the Terminator and Skynet. And maybe perhaps it wasn't a scientific study, but I found it interesting, just as kind of me and my colleagues and group of people that I chat with, we're all a little bit hesitant at the beginning to adopt it because of the risks associated with getting your face melted off. However, over the course of the last few years, people are more comfortable, businesses are less reluctant, and really encouraging the use of AI technology in their business. So we've always had governance challenges, but the urgency that we're seeing today is a little different. So first, we're seeing the new compliance mandates, and that's not just in the US, but it's globally. Like, it kind of started with, GDPR and things like that, but now kind of moving stateside. I say it like I'm from the States. I'm really not. I'm Canadian, but I sound convincing, do I not? The DOJ DSP, but we also have our regulatory requirements in Canada as well. They're similar, more similar to GDPR, but very similar, of course. And then ongoing industry regulations that we need to account for. The second is kind of that shift or evolution of our hybrid cloud environments and where we're actually storing data. Because, it used to be that, all our stuff's in SharePoint or all our stuff's on a file share. Our content's no longer sitting in one spot. So the ability and the challenge of having kind of all these disparate systems and the need to understand what's in there and bring it together is kind of the time is now. And then, of course, the third is that pressure that we are all seeing for operational efficiency, the do more with less, and organizations are less reluctant now to turn to automation and tools that can help with that. So let's start with just a note on regulations then. So the regulatory compliance landscape is absolutely becoming more complex, I'll say. Again, given where you are and where your business operates, you'll have to kind of keep that in mind. But we're not only dealing with one or two laws anymore, we're dealing with a lot of international data privacy compliance, the DSP from the DOJ. So it's not just the number of regulations that's changed, but it's being able to demonstrate and prove control, that you can do what you say. You can prove that you are protecting sensitive data. You can demonstrate your policies and how you're enforcing them, or can you defend your, retention policies and regulations and decisions. So again, that manual classification, it just simply won't cut it, and it can't scale. So it's really not just kind of this theoretical risk. It is a real risk that carries, again, we were talking about, not only the financial from penalties, but that reputational damage by not being in compliance with your own regulations and policies is also very damaging. On the note of the technology and kind of where our stuff is sitting. So again, most organization has moved from that all our stuff's in SharePoint to all our stuff's everywhere. And not only like still on-prem, but different cloud platforms, collaboration tools, kind of hybrid, if you think of like the Salesforces of the world and stuff. So this has created and will continue to create these multiple data silos. So with different permissions, with different access, with different capabilities. So the ability to be able to not have to lift and shift or move to a new system, but however, manage in place, like keep that stuff where it is. Like it's too expensive, it's too disruptive to move it, it's too risky to move it. Keep it where it is. Keep it where it is and kind of come down from the top and pull things up so that you can see where everything is. Because we can do that in a way that we can govern appropriately still, but again, without that disruption of moving things. And it can certainly enable the platform agnostic governance, enabling those consistent controls across those different landscapes, highly effective in helping with that. And then, of course, the third one, the digital transformation and efficiencies and those cost efficiencies and that doing less with more. So we know that, especially as we are feeding our corporate data into LLMs and AI engines, that data is an asset. And we all know that now. And the information that we hold in our content and our data is extremely valuable. So it's only valuable, though, if it's accurate. If it's right, if it's organized, if it's classified correctly, if it's governed correctly. And we know, and we have seen not only kind of in the news of AI, going horribly wrong, but it starts with that poorly governed data. And that human factor of, having to manually classify documents or apply those retention rules as it's created or as it happens, we have already talked about it. It's time consuming, it's inconsistent, it's, error prone. So having that automation kind of certainly improves the workforce productivity by removing that burden from humans and asking the machines to do it. And of course, managing rot. So cost pressures of, keeping stuff when we don't need it, keeping stuff where we don't need it, having systems. We have seen this repeatedly. I don't really know what's in there, but we've had it for 25 years and it's sitting there. So ballooning storage costs, it was cheap 20 years ago, not so much now. So storage costs and e-discovery, and this kind of this ask of doing more with less resources, less budget, is something that we're finding organizations are really taking a look at now, and adopting auto classification and AI because of these.
No questions in the chat yet.
Questions. Okay, perfect.
And the thing is that for you to have a conversation with your business partners about your information governance program and bringing an automation tool, is that you can say that you can provide your aspirational AI projects with authoritative documents that can give you authoritative answers with information that you actually trust, that and that you control. And that those three legs of that stool are critical for any internal AI project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. We get a question often, is auto classification AI? And yeah, so artificial intelligence, is not new, has been around for over 50 years. And it is any kind of technology or computer system that is kind of taking that decision off of a human. So problem solving or learning from experience or recognizing things, making decisions, understanding things, understanding language off of a human, and it's the computer doing it. So there's a few types of AI. There's more types than this, but kind of the big four are machine learning. And that is that subset of AI that focuses on developing algorithms and statistical models to make predictions or decisions based on data that it's seeing. So these machine learning algorithms improve automatically over time without having to be explicitly programmed to do so. The second kind is extractive AI, and these are often powered by natural language processing that is designed to kind of extract information or fragments of information from big data sets. Generative AI is the cool kind of stuff that we see with OpenAI doing, where you can literally have a conversation with it and you think it's real. So it's creating net new content. It can absolutely be drawing on content it's learned from, but it is generating net new content by way of text or images or music, based on the things it's been trained on, to generate new stuff that has not existed before. And then agentic AI, I guess, is the newest kind that goes beyond that, responding to prompts or to executing on things. So it relies on this kind of degree of autonomy to be able to do that. So we at Valora, and it's machine learning, and it is extractive. And there is a reason for that. And it is because these types of AI are more transparent, they are tunable, and they are defensible, more so than generative AI, which is making new content. And as if you've heard or read or experienced has a tendency to hallucinate or to make up things that it actually wasn't trained on. And no one knows really kind of where that comes from. So a solid auto classification technology will rely on machine learning algorithms and that extractive AI to be able to stay defensible, to be able to tune and always ask that defensible question, why did it think of this, why did it say this, why did it perform this action with that? You can always roll that back and see those reasons why. And kind of using AI in that capacity allows the technology to confidently automate and analyze and classify the data based on what it's reading. And not only that, again, to kind of bring it up into that single pane of glass view. So now users can, rather than dealing with 30 million documents, can kind of see and be able to manage that unstructured and structured data in a single interface. And of course, enhances that searchability across all those multiple things. So it's kind of pulling out and using that extractive AI and the machine learning algorithms to be able to extract that data from multiple data silos and sources. So how does that work in the back end? If you've attended one of our webinars before or you're familiar with the Valora, you'll know how this works. But for those who are new, it is AI. It is that form of machine learning and extractive AI, and it is the machine making those decisions. So it is the software that's performing the action of classifying and the disposition of that. And it's ultimately answering for each piece of information it comes across, what is this thing and what do I do with it? And then actually does it. So what it first does is look for and determine the attributes of that file. So historically with a file share or something, you'll look at file metadata and you'll see, last created date, created by, authored by, whatever, name, but it really doesn't tell us anything that's in there. So we're going to determine the attributes of that file by opening up that file, reading it, and then now pulling out things that matter. So if it's a contract, I don't care if I created it today. I care if it's a contract, what the creation date, the signature date was, what the effective date or the last activity or the expiration date of that contract, or is there, a renewal date, things like that. So it's pulling out the details and creating that rich metadata. And then based on what's in there, it will make those decisioning algorithms with the recognition algorithms to say, oh, this is a contract. Because it's got yada, yada, yada. And then based on what it is, we'll then determine what to do with it and determine the disposition and handling. So if it is a contract, what kind of contract is it? Oh, it's an employment contract. Cool. If it's an employment contract, mark it as confidential, move it to SharePoint, keep it for 8 years after that employee has no longer with us. And before we get rid of it, let's get HR's approval required before we get rid of it. So that's an example of all the different, disposition actions and workflows that can take place. And it's not just the disposition or deletion at the end the end of that life cycle of a document, but it could be anything. Take all this stuff and delete it because it's rot. Why is it rot? Well, it's obsolete because it's old or it's past retention or there's 1,000 different versions of this that are all garbage. So whatever that action is, whether we need to report on it, migrate it, move it, redact it, anonymize it, put it under some kind of preservation or legal hold, that's something that can be managed through a single platform. And an example of course,
I was going to say a couple of points on this.
Yeah.
It may seem very aspirational to some of you to actually automate disposition and disposal, but believe me, it is possible to get your business to agree. We've had implementations and instances where, because we have a repeatable set of business rules to guide the business through what those rules are, what the computer will do in certain situations, how those rules are then reviewed and approved and made effective, and getting the business to approve those rules as a part of the disposition process allows you then to go ahead and say, I'm going to automate based on these rules that you've approved and still solicit you for exceptions to these rules, right? And get the business comfortable with automating some of these things, because the volume and velocity of data, it can't be overcome if there's a human in the middle that has to say yes to delete or no to delete, right? By getting your business partners to understand that these these automation rules are things that they still will have to approve exceptions to, and that they have to approve in order to get past the volume and velocity, I think is key. And believe me, they don't want to have to make these decisions on disposal. By being able to automate it and have an auditable trail to that automation, you can get a lot more buy-in and hopefully get over the hump on some of the volume of data that you guys are holding.
Totally. Yeah. When auto-classifying unstructured data, quite often this is what you'll see in a file share or a SharePoint, where the file name, LGPIF final, doesn't really tell me anything about it. So what the auto-classification engine is doing, it will open each document, and again, it will read and extract that information and create it as metadata. So it's the system going through and saying, pulling out the doc type, the people involved, the dates involved, expiration, date executed, renewal, things like that. And then it's the auto-classification system saying, oh, this is a consent form. It's a clinical trial. The retention is based on the records retention schedule, which is the executed date plus 8 years. The sensitivity classification is confidential. Why? Because it contains, a patient's personal data. How do we handle it? We delete at the end of its life cycle after the appropriate authorization. And is this document eligible for AI training? No. Why? Because it contains someone's personal data. Let's anonymize it or randomize it. And then we retain it until such date as it is then destroyed.
And for you records managers, we can also determine if this document has been superseded by a renewal, and in fact show you the chain to say, here are 5 copies of it. Looks like the exact same document, but here's the timestamps on each one, the 3 that expired, the one that currently is effective, and the one that is pending a signature, and be able to show you that record history so that when you affect disposal decisions on the first 3, because they're more than 10 years old, you can see this is the other 2 that are in play that we're retaining.
Absolutely. On the structured side, whether it be in kind of CSV format or structured databases or data lakes, we kind of do the same thing. So we will auto-classify fielded data, but then keep that fielded data and maintain that record family, I'll say, into a mockument, and we'll create that into a mockument. So it really is, it's a solution for making structured data a little bit more interpretable for humans. So it will create a document-like format. So I'm as a human, I'm not going to have to go through 30,000 lines of this document to be able to find what I'm looking for. Mockuments allows us to visualize structured data from multiple systems, structured data lakes, things like that, kind of in a dossier format. So very helpful if I'm looking for employee information, or if I'm pulling a legal hold request, or if I'm doing DSAR request to try to, the right to be forgotten or something. Very easy to find things without having to look at the original source for the human teams that are tasked with that. And then again, auto-classifying at the enterprise level is taking all of those sources, being able to connect to and analyze and classify all of those sources so that you can confidently say, I know where I know what we have, I know where it is, I know who has access, these, and these are personal data, these are confidential, I know what policies to apply, and now I know the risk of everything that's being out there so that I can manage that accordingly. And by being able to do all that, most of the organizations we work with are using auto-classification in these 6 main ways. So the first is absolutely data discovery and classification. And you are not alone if you're like, I don't know where everything is. Every business is like that. We don't know, we got all this stuff in here. We don't know what's in here, but I'm pretty sure there's some important stuff in here. So being able to identify where stuff is, what it is, how and when it should be managed is kind of the first out of the gate thing that we do and that everybody does. And then some businesses kind of branch out into, first of all, rot and file cleanup. So the ability to now be able to take our 200 terabytes to say, well, okay, actually these 120 terabytes are actually garbage. Why? Because they're redundant, obsolete, and trivial, and I can prove the status of those by all of these things. So being able to actually release that and confidently dispose of the data that you do not need as a business is huge, not only from a cost savings for IT and storage capacity, but then how you need to manage the good stuff over time gets a lot easier. The third bucket folks are using auto classification for is absolutely records management. So the ability to do just kind of like what we saw, pull out those trigger dates, automate workflows to be able to say, this is a Jen's compensation plan. Is she an employee? Yes. Is she active? Yes. Oh, with the day she becomes inactive, that's the trigger to say now that's the trigger date plus 7 years that we can, get rid of these documents. So being able to automate that and kind of stand back and let the system find those triggers and defensively do that disposition on its own, and of course with a human in the loop and human oversight, but is takes a lot off of that manualness that folks are doing now for records management. And the last three on the bottom, certainly data privacy and governance risk and compliance mandates. So the ability to go out and find all of the PII, I'll say traditional PII, like PII, PHI, and PCI, but then also other corporate sensitive information, the kernel's secret recipe and the secret sauce and things like that. Being able to go out and find that and be able to properly protect it within your own data organization is hugely helpful, obviously. The second one in the bottom row is that legal hold and e-discovery. So faster, absolutely, process when something does happen and we have to go find this thing about one thing between these people and these dates is a matter of clicks away. And once you know where everything is and it's already classified, it makes that process very easy, very less time consuming, and very less costly with your either inside or outside law firms. And then of course, AI readiness. We are going to talk about this until we are blue in the face about reducing the risk and maximizing the efficacy of your Gen AI agents, starting with that data hygiene, with good data that that you trust, that is ready and that is correct. So those are how organizations are using auto classification today.
Do we want to pause for a question if anybody has any questions? Or maybe pause for a comment. Did you say the kernel meaning the Colonel Sanders secret recipe?
I need the kernel. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's what I thought you said. So just a couple of comments on these. The elevation of each one of these pillars to being top of mind for an organization varies on you and your organization. I got to tell you, there was a time where AI readiness in the last 9 months, 12 months became top of mind. But, events that end up on the cover of the Wall Street Journal about organizations losing access to their data and not knowing what data they have access to, and the impact of that made data privacy and GRC processes suddenly be number one, right? And as an information governance professional, being able to help your chief information security officer know what they have, where they have it, and what their obligations are, makes it so they don't have to protect everything everywhere, because they can't. And by you using data discovery and classification to be able to help them know where are the things that are important that I need to protect and harden, where are the things that are redundant and maybe we can affect some disposal to them, helps immensely in that as that starts to escalate to the top. But obviously, if it's AI readiness, then you need to worry about authoritative documents. If it's data privacy, then you need to worry about trying to identify those systems of record where reliable documents that you have to control and where they live.
Absolutely. Let's hop into, if there's no questions, let's hop into a use case. I will preface this by saying you will never see a client list on our website or a list of logos on our website. We take our NDAs very seriously, and we do not talk about our clients. And usually because they are of a sensitive nature, they are a sensitive industries and organizations, and what we are doing is they're shy. That's right.
They're just shy.
They're just shy. But one that we do talk about and joins us on webinars and at industry events is Oracle. And so we absolutely have their permission to share this information with you. So let's talk about what Oracle, what their challenges are. And you're like, how could Oracle have any challenges? They're Oracle. But over like the last 25 or 30 years, they have grown by acquisition. So they have at this point, over 150 acquisitions. And just, you can imagine that data that they have inherited. Specifically in the HR department, that's over 140,000 employee records and their history that have been acquired. Now, during all of these acquisitions, their challenges were, I don't really know what to keep and what to delete because it's not my data. And the people who knew about the data or knew how to handle some of the data and decisions didn't come over with the acquisition, so no one knew. And they realized in doing this, and now specifically with the HR department, that they were out of compliance with their own retention policies when it came to HR data. And their biggest challenges were, so how do we execute on our records retention policies that we've said are in place? How do we integrate with bring all of this kind of disparate data over into our system of record, and then at the same time, maintaining and respecting the legal holds that are on the data that we're inheriting and bringing into our data stores. So this is kind of where we met Oracle several years ago. And at that state, again, they had inherited all of that data. There was no real centralized content control on all of that acquired data that was coming in. And it was really, everyone was very reliant on the people who were coming in with that data to say, who is this? Where's what's your the effective date, and who came over and who didn't, and where did they live and what jurisdiction? So all of that unknown. And they kind of the why now, what was their trigger? It was that they kind of looked behind them and they were like, we got a lot of stuff. And we don't have anybody to answer these questions. We are out of compliance. We need a way to get this under control. So their plan of attack to do so was in a phased approach. And this is probably like everybody else's data stores. They had all of their digital files that were, again, we're talking about the HR department here. So it was their HR M&A files. They had all of the paper files and the warehouses of data, paper that came over with those acquisitions. And then they had their legacy data. So this was legacy Oracle personnel data, old PeopleSoft, old ERP servers, things that they knew were old and they weren't using, but the data was still living in there. So the goals that they set out at the beginning of their, kind of engagement were, like our challenges were, I don't know. It was what everybody kind of comes to us with was we don't know. And it's in these systems and we don't know. It's everywhere. And there's copies, there's duplicates everywhere. So the ability to consolidate all of those resources in a single place where they can still have their 150 different acquisitions, or if they put it in a big bucket or if they kept it separate, but the ability to see that and manage that through a single interface, to consolidate the resources, to consolidate the storage they were using, and more importantly, to have that single source of truth, to come to one place to be able to manage and search and do activities on all of that acquired data so that they would be in compliance, and that those were their goals. What we saw and what we realized and they realized is that they were building the on-ramp for every other acquisition that was coming in behind them. And there have been several over the course of the last few years. So whether they knew it or not, they were kind of building this kind of cheat sheet or on-ramp to all that data. So what they did first is they planned the route, just like you went on a road trip. So they made the decision, where are we going? Do I have the right people in the car? Do I have the right people around me? Yes, we've all decided we're doing this. And then they kind of moved on to the right tools. So working with the right partner who has the ability to do all of the things that you need, regardless of how customized your business or your needs might be. They built and we built the workflow. So trusting that process to follow the directions to make sure that all of that automation was in place. And the ability to have that right-sized approach. So just like when you're on a car trip, when you've got one extra person who wants to go from here to there, you need to upgrade from your, your car to the minivan. So the ability to scale up when needed and then also to scale down was very important for them as well. That hazard sign, ready for hazards, was the ability and being ready to overcome obstacles. After kind of getting through the first 140 acquisitions, they were like, yeah, we got this. Yeah, we're good. We know what to look for. We know what those gotchas are. And then up in the top right-hand corner, you always want the person who's going to bring car snacks, who's always thinking ahead. Where are we going to next? How many jelly beans are we going to need until we have the next stop? So having that partner in place that is always thinking ahead and, oh, what about this? And what about that? To making sure that they were ready was very important and valuable for them. And what they saw and what they are still seeing is ultimately properly managed content, which was their biggest goal. But what we found was implementing a Valora on top of their data reduced that manual effort, not a lie, by 95%. Because what they did at the beginning was they benchmark before they even started or engaged. Like, actually, how long does it take when we have a request for information or we have a hold or a litigation on employee data? Actually, how long does that take for our team to go in and find that? And it was 3.5 weeks was the average time it took someone to go back to that stakeholder and say, here is your report, here is the data that you need. So we have reduced that search to like 3.5 seconds instead of 3.5 weeks. So just the efficiencies in that is remarkable. But the ability to have that. Sorry, go ahead.
One of the things that we've also seen with organizations that are supporting their information governance program through mergers and acquisitions is the defensible acquisition of intellectual property. The whole point of your organization buying this company is because there's value there. And if that value happens to be in some of the intellectual property that organization has, being able to demonstrate, hey, we took their systems, we classified their information, found the valuable, intellectual property that was a part of that, and all the attribution of how that was created, and brought that into our company. So now, should there be a challenge, we have all of the original scientists, we have all their notes, we have all the things that show that intellectual property is ours moving forward. It's an incredible, a value add for your information governance program to be able to talk to your business partners about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and the outcome for this specific and for any other is that kind of that idea of lather, rinse, repeat. Once you've got it and those workflows nailed down, the classification and the retention, the disposition, point it at something else and have that go through. So what we found and what the HR team and the IG team found is they really became this kind of company role model for the global compliance, and they just kind of rolled that out globally for those use cases. So that's just a sneak peek into Oracle and their use case, and it continues to evolve. Years and years later, the use cases continue to evolve. So it's really fun to see. Here's our reality check, though. I had a meeting last week with somebody who was new, had heard about Valora, but was new. And so we were chatting, and she's like, this just sounds magical. And I said, well, it is. It does sound like great magic genie, unicorn magic. But the reality is it is not. It is like any other form of AI, AutoClassification is artificial intelligence, and it requires ongoing optimization and fine-tuning of those recognition algorithms, so it's always on the top of its game. And the thing is, we will always need a human in the loop. Is that, oh, this is going to replace my job, things like that. That's just not going to happen. With any other kind of AI, you're going to need that human in the loop to verify results, to be that human decision maker in the room, to be able to do that. And also to account for change, as your organization evolves, as the data within your organization evolves, your requirements, your regulatory requirements, your industry requirements will evolve and change. So ensuring that you've got the right tools that will be able to evolve and change and adapt with you and your data is also key, and is also something that's always happening behind the scenes in those recognition and machine learning algorithms that are baked into an auto classification technology. Most people ask, so great, how do we get started, and how do most organizations adopt something like this? And we often say, start with a use case, start with a pilot, and to make, it kind of covers a lot of bases. It gives you an idea of what it looks like, gives you an idea of what it can do to make sure it's going to fit your needs. So we often say, kind of start with the lowest hanging fruit, or, what's the biggest challenge or the highest risk, to really realize that immediate ROI, to be able to kind of prove it out to yourself, to the rest of your organizations, to the rest of your stakeholders, to the decision makers. And when you do that and start with a pilot, always having that kind of look forward to, because it can do all of these wonderful magical things, maybe we start with rot and rot reduction, but always think about, where are we going to go next for records management? Or while we're looking and classifying all this, let's pull out personal data or that sensitive corporate data, or pull out the compensation plan so they're not sitting in the file share. So always having that look forward to, what do we need it to do next? And will it meet all of my future use case requirements? And then absolutely measure results, just like Oracle did. Benchmark, how long is it taking me to do things now? What do I need, and what resources do I need to do it now? And then mark and benchmark that change when you've got auto classification doing it for you, because you will find the efficiencies when you mark it and map it are quite remarkable. And then, of course, build on that success. So once that pilot's done and everybody's like, ting, you proved the ROI, people are bought in, all of your other kind of departments are like, yeah, me next, me next. The nice thing is that once you've got it in and you're using it, just like we saw all those use cases, you can run all of those use cases at the same time in different departments for different things and different reporting. It's all on the same chassis. So the ability to add to that and expand on what you already have is quite often the case with most clients. And then, of course, spreading the word within your organization. We've had clients who it started in IG and somebody got word of it and legal says, can you see that? And they do a little bit of a showcase and a little tour, and they say, okay, yeah, no, I want to use that too. So it doesn't have to start at the enterprise level where you're connecting 180 systems. It can start in a department or with a specific use case and then expand from there. So don't let it overwhelm you that it can't, it has to be everything or nothing. You can absolutely take baby steps, and that's very often what most clients do.
And the value multiplier for each one of these is very company dependent. You may find that reducing your organizational risk for a data loss event is a significant value to your organization. Or you may find that being able to supply your, AI teams with trusted data that they can use as a part of their development of business solutions, that is a priority and has value. So, your ROI model may vary, but truly make sure you look for value in some of the business priorities that you may have today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we will leave you with some final thoughts. The first being absolutely automating the classification and management of content based on its value, and the retention needs will absolutely help in data governance and lifecycle management of your content at scale. Absolutely increase productivity and operational efficiency. We have seen that, again, doing more with less, and having this automated lessens the need for that manual reliance on our teams to be able to do that, to be able to enable and have it be scalable and adaptable in whatever environment that it's in, to be able to maintain that quality and the relevance of the data at scale. And then the bottom three are everybody's talking about it. Everybody's thinking about it. Strike while that iron is hot. AI and types of AI are very top of mind for most organizations now. People want it. They have mandates to deliver it, whatever that might be. And right now, auto-classification and other types of AI are quite neatly fitting in with business goals. But again, you are that sane head around the table to say, we can't do that until we have clean data, and we need to be able to be confident. It is imperative that we have clean data when asking AINs to learn on it, so that we know that it's right, that it's appropriate, that it is permissible to train our engines on. And it is your time to shine. It is just the evolution, again, kind of in that last 5-10 years, the evolution and importance of these information governance of you and your information governance role in organizations. People are like, oh yeah, it is actually the heartbeat of our entire organization. And if none other, it is absolutely your time to shine in your organizations and be around the table when people are making those decisions about efficiencies and about AI. And I will open it up if there's any questions or comments. This would be a great time for that. If there's any questions? Oh, look, Rich, I didn't put your picture up there. Sandy sends her regards.
She's much better looking.
Stamp over Sandy. She will be back. She will be back next month for our webinar next month. Sorry about that, Rich. And Rich, thank you for joining me. Okay. It's been
happy to contribute.
Been a pleasure having. Great. We'll leave the questions open just for a minute, but as always, please, here's our email addresses. Please feel free to reach out over email. Again, this deck and the recording will be sent to you, if not today, then probably tomorrow morning. And if you are interested in chatting further or maybe seeing it in action, booking a demo, either reach out here or reach out on the email that I send you later with the, awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks so much again for joining us, and we will see you next time.